In Good Hands is a Turkish film that explores the story of a single mother named Melissa and her son, Can. The two of them are living a very happy life as best friends, until Melissa is diagnosed with a terminal illness. She finds out that she only has a few months left, but the thing that bothers her most is finding someone who will take care of her son after she's gone. She does have a friend named Fados, but she wants Can to have a father figure. Fortunately, she meets business tycoon Ferhat, and things seem pretty swell at the beginning. But when secrets from the past catch up, you'll find that there's a lot more than meets the eye. Melissa is a single parent who resides with her son Can. The two of them share a unique bond in the sense that they're best friends before they are mother and son. Can is closest to his mother and literally spends every waking moment of his life with her. He doesn't even go to school, despite Melissa's attempts at getting him to go. The only other person Can is close to is his aunt Fados, who is Melissa's best friend. Overall, things seem to be going well for the mother-son duo in their perfect little life until Melissa is diagnosed with a terminal illness, and she finds that she has only 5 more months left. Melissa is devastated, but not so much at the thought of dying. She feels that she has already lived her life to the fullest, and so she's ready for death. But what she's actually worried about is her son, Can. She can't help wonder who will take care of him once she's gone. Fados tries to convince Melissa not to give up on dating. She wants her to try and find the right guy and even goes on to find matches for her on dating apps. She reasons that Can would need someone to look after him when Melissa is gone, but Melissa just brushes off the subject altogether. However, she still brings it up with Can, who immediately shuts her down. Apparently, he doesn't want a new dad, and he's definitely not ready to share his mom with anyone else. He even makes her promise never to bring another guy into their lives, which she does. But it only adds to her worries because soon enough Can won't be able to rely on her. While grabbing coffee and a pastry, Melissa and Can bump into business tycoon Ferhat. Ferhat is frustrated at how long it's taking Can to count the coins, and he tries to rush them. However, when they don't oblige, he makes a scene and steals the pastry Can was about to buy, only to throw it in the nearest trash can. Needless to say, both parties hate each other. But Melissa finds his picture on magazine covers, and it seems like she really can't get him out of her head. In fact, she even dreams about him. This finally pushes her to approach him, and she gets Fados to babysit Can while she goes clubbing, in an attempt to run into Ferhat again. Fados is initially against the idea because she knows Ferhat isn't exactly a good guy, but she gives in because it's the first time Melissa has actually agreed to give someone a chance. Melissa meets Ferhat at the bar and he informs her that she's not her type. So, she goes on stage to perform just to prove him wrong. He's actually impressed and asks her out for a drink to apologize for the other day. The two of them share life stories over drinks and they seem to actually be getting along. But when Melissa gets up to leave, she finds that she lost her son's handkerchief, Manu, which he entrusted her only to ensure that she won't stay out late. Ferhat points at a white cloth floating on the water, telling her that it's too late. However, Melissa jumps into the cold water without a second thought to retrieve Manu. Ferhat jumps right after and they manage to save the cloth, even though they're both fully drenched and close to freezing to death. Nevertheless, Ferhat seems to have fallen in love with her due to her willingness to go to any extent for the one she loves. Melissa returns home and tries not to make a sound. She quietly tries to slip Manu next to Can so he wouldn't know that she didn't come home at night. However, Can wakes up as soon as the handkerchief touches his skin and he's pretty mad at his mom for coming so late. He ignores her altogether and storms into his room. Later, Ferhat invites Melissa out to dinner, but she declines because she can't leave Can alone at home. But much to her surprise, he invites Can to come along as well. So, Melissa persuades Can to dress nice and act like a good boy. Can, though, has other plans. He's not at all pleased to see Ferhat, even though he apologizes and he makes sure to express this. Melissa scolds him and tells him to behave. But he accidentally sets the tablecloth on fire, which sets off the sprinklers and they're all completely soaked. Melissa obviously scolds Can profusely, but he doesn't show any sort of remorse. He's still adamant when they get back home. He doesn't want Ferhat to associate with his mom anymore, and he most definitely doesn't want him to be his dad. At this, Melissa informs him that after the incident at the restaurant, it would be a miracle if Ferhat ever acknowledges their existence again. But as they say, miracles do happen once in a while, and sure enough, Melissa receives a call from Ferhat. Ferhat insists that he wants to talk to Can, and Can immediately gives him a piece of his mind. He tries to scare him off, but Ferhat remains undeterred. In fact, he plans to go and see a car race with Can, that too alone. Can agrees because he thinks that once he's out of Melissa's sight, he'll be able to get rid of Ferhat for good. So, Ferhat and Can head off to the races in Ferhat's car, but Melissa is skeptical about the whole thing and decides to secretly follow them with Fados. Once inside the car, Can asks Ferhat what his price would be to leave his mom alone. He tells her that he doesn't really have a lot of money, but he's willing to negotiate. Ferhat is somewhat taken aback by his straightforwardness and counters by asking about Can's friends. He also points out that Melissa doesn't count since she's his mother. Can can't come up with an answer because he actually doesn't have any friends since he doesn't even go to school. Ferhat takes Can to a dog shelter where he's mesmerized by a little girl. Melissa also comes out from the shadows because she's completely against getting a dog. But Can returns to tell them that he wants to take Siren home with them. Upon Melissa's objection, they decide that Siren can stay at Ferret's house, and can visit her every now and then. However, it turns out that Siren was the little girl's name, and Can really doesn't want the dog that Melissa and Ferret brought home thinking it was Siren. But since he's now stuck with the dog, Can decides to name it Ferret just to spite Ferret. But surprisingly, Ferret is quite resilient and doesn't seem too bothered by this either. Melissa works as a server at a cafe, and one of the regular customers there harasses her by calling her dearie. This genuinely bothers Can, and he wishes he could somehow shut him up. And Ferret drops by when Melissa's working her shift the next day. He calls out the customer and makes him apologize to both Melissa and Can. This finally earns him Can's favor because he helped his mother out. But of course, he still can't fully trust him yet. So, he decides to test Ferret's loyalty. He takes him out to a random house in the street and throws a rock at the window to intentionally break it. The owner of the house is obviously displeased and ready to take on whoever dared damage his window. He comes out to see Ferret and Can. Ferret sides with him and tries to tell Can off until Can calls him dad. His eyes go wide as he realizes that Can is trying to get him into trouble. But before the owner can fully process the situation, Ferret grabs Can and starts running the other way. The owner and a few guys chase after them, but they eventually lose them. Ferret asks Can why he would ever do such a thing, but he casually informs him that he was only testing him. And Ferret smiles, knowing that he finally earned Can's trust and favor. For a while, things seem to go smoothly. You could even call it perfect. But perfection doesn't really exist, does it? So, of course, it was merely the calm before the storm. Ferret asks Melissa about Can's obsession with toilet paper, and she tells him about his father and how he left to get toilet paper, but was met with an accident. Since then, Can has been wary of his mother leaving the same way, which was why Melissa made sure that they never ran out of toilet paper. And once this secret was out, it seemed like Melissa had finally confided completely in Ferret. But the worst was yet to come. And in a strange turn of events, Can sees his dad very much alive and well on the street. He runs to him even though Melissa tries to stop him. Apparently, that man is Melissa's friend who had gone to Germany. And he surely isn't Can's dad. But then, who is? Upon being reunited with his dad, Can is both skeptical and relieved. But Fados tries to drag him away as Melissa collapses amidst the commotion. She is soon rushed to a hospital as Fados attempts to pacify Can. Melissa eventually wakes up in a hospital bed and realizes that she doesn't have much time left. But before she can leave, she has to confront two major truths. One, that she was dying, and secondly, the reality of Can's father. Ferret is also at the hospital, and he feels betrayed by how Melissa tricked him into falling in love with her. He accuses her that she only connected with him to secure Can's future, and all the feelings between them are merely a fraud. She targeted him because he was well off and could easily afford to take Can in. But he is still very much dejected and demands to know why Melissa picked him out of all the people. Melissa also feels cornered, and she isn't able to take the blame of the betrayal anymore. She decides that there is no way to try and ignore the truth anymore. She has to face her past no matter what. She has to be brave and do the right thing. Can deserves the truth, and so does Ferret. She hadn't meant to wrong anyone. She had her reasons for everything she did up until that point. And so, she finally decides to tell Ferret the truth about Can's father, and he is definitely not prepared for what's to come. Melissa takes him back to the time when she fell in love for the first time. She tells him about a boy that she was absolutely obsessed with, and how she would visit a certain club where he performed every night. She would stare up at him admiringly but never dared to actually go up and talk to him. Still, she knew that they would get along just fine if she ever did. And one day, she finally mustered up enough nerve to talk to him. They had a few drinks and decided to head back to her place. They even spent the night together. But when she woke up the next morning, the boy told her that he just needed to get some toilet paper from the store and that he'd be back in no time. And in her naivety, she believed him. So, she waited and waited and waited until she just couldn't anymore. And eventually, she realized that he wasn't ever coming back. Ferret stared at her disbelievingly as she told her story. And it all came back to him. It was him. He was Can's father. It had been him all along. And so, it seemed that the truth really was bitter. Melissa continues that she found out she was pregnant not long after that night. And a little hope flickered within her again. She looked for Ferret everywhere, work, the club, anywhere and everywhere that she could think of. But it seemed as if he had disappeared from the face of the earth. But she still decided to keep the child. And she didn't regret that decision once. Can had been her reason to stay alive for this long. However, when she was diagnosed with a terminal illness, she began to worry about him and who would take care of him after she left. Can didn't just need a caretaker, he needed a parent, someone to raise him as his own. Melissa confesses that she never intended to involve Ferret, but it so happened that she encountered him just then at the cafe. And then she kept seeing him on magazine covers and even in her dreams. The thought kept haunting her until she gave in. She decided to seduce Ferret and get him involved in Can's life, maybe even tell him the truth when the time was right. And though the time wasn't right just yet, the truth had come to light, as it always does. When she is done narrating her story, Ferret gets up and leaves without a word. Honestly, he doesn't even know what to say. He can't even fully process the situation. It's too much too soon for him. Can had stayed with Fatima while Melissa was in the hospital, but he is definitely not pleased to see his mom back. He quickly informs her that although he knew she was sick, he isn't interested in whatever lies she has conjured up for him. But before he has a chance to vent it all out, Melissa bursts into tears. She doesn't have anything more to say. Her life was slowly but surely flashing before her eyes as her 6-year-old child stared innocently at her. Before long, he also bursts into tears. He coddles his mom's face and pleads for her not to cry. He asks her for reassurance that she isn't really sick, and he promises that he won't ever ask about his father again. At this, Melissa simply smiles and tells him that it's okay and that she knows how he can't help but ask about his father. Melissa's condition is critical and it's progressively growing worse. She wants Can to get used to living with Fado since she is their only hope now. Things hadn't quite turned out the way she had anticipated, but it was fate, and fate is known to be cruel. However, Furret gradually comes to his senses as well, and he decides to own up to his responsibilities. The mother of his child is dying. His son needs him. He doesn't have time to sulk around. He needs to be there for them. So, he grabs Furret the dog and heads over to meet Can, and the two of them go to Melissa's place together. Melissa wakes up to the smell of warm breakfast and finds Furret and Can seated at the breakfast table. She joins them at the table and can't help but smile at how far they've come and how they're finally bonding as a father and son should. It seems like life is finally in her favor. She can die peacefully without worrying about Can. Can has his father by his side. His father is ready to be there for him. Furret is ready to be a father to their child, and she doesn't need to worry about anything else. For some time, life is perfect again. Furret, Melissa, and Can spend time together at their home, just cherishing each other's presence. Furret even stays the night because he wants to make the most of his time with his newfound family. But when he wakes up, Melissa is nowhere to be found. Soon enough, Furret finds the diary that she left behind for Can. She left them because she couldn't bear to hurt them anymore by dying a slow and painful death in front of them. Even the toilet paper rolls are gone from the storage room because there was no need for them anymore. Can's father was home again, and so Melissa decided that they don't need an endless supply of toilet paper. Furret was home with Can. They didn't need anything else. In the final shot, we see Melissa's shoes on the shore, and it seems that she decided to go for a Can is obviously devastated that his mother is gone, and he can't help but ask Furret what happens when people die. Furret is also grieving and admits that he doesn't know what happens when people die. Still, the two of them have grown quite close, and Can settles on staying with Furret as his roommate. Furret hands him the diary that Melissa left behind for him. He slowly runs his fingers over the pages and can't help but smile at the drawings of him and Furret, Doggy Furret, and even Siren. But he also warns Furret that if he wants to stay with him, he'll need to follow his rules. In fact, he advises him to read the journal his mother had kept, called Can for Dummies, and they both let out a swift chuckle. It seems that Can has finally found a friend in Furret, just like Melissa had wanted. He is in good hands, and so, Melissa is probably smiling right back at them from wherever she is. Although some might call it a tragic ending, that's not fair. You see, the film emphasizes the importance of human connection, how powerful love can be, and how sometimes, all you need to have a good life is a good friend. Melissa left Can, but she left him in good hands. She would not have been in peace unless her son was well taken care of. And with Furret, she didn't have anything to worry about. He was his father, and he decided to be a dad for him even though he could have just as easily left. But he stayed. He stayed for his son. And that's proof enough of his love for his son and how it could conquer all. Hence, there's no denying that Can was in good hands and that Melissa was finally at rest, and that's definitely a happy ending.